Okay, guys, today's conversation, I think, will be I'm sure it will be very insightful. And today I'm joined by Margaret, the CEO of Woodpecker. I would say Woodpecker is a classical cold email company that's been on the market for a long time and one of pioneers, I would say. So I think we'll discuss a lot of best practices when it comes to cold emailing. I'm also curious to know where Woodpecker is actually heading and innovations you're planning. So very curious, and of course some practical guidance on how to survive in 2025. Obviously. Okay, so Margaret, you can just introduce yourself really quickly, and we can start.
Sure, amazing. So thanks for this invitation. And just as Vivek said, I'm a CEO at Woodpecker, and that's been like almost 10 years on the market with cold emailing. So that's been really something. And I'm super excited to talk about all like deliverability and stuff related to sending, because personally, this world keeps us running and keeps us entertained. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and we are still alive. That's the most important thing. We're still alive, and we're still growing our agencies, and that's really cool. So maybe I would like to start from Woodpecker. So I've been using Woodpecker for like long time, and we still use it in my agency chapters, and a lot of changes recently. So when it comes to product development, it's quite dynamic. So you introduced spin tags, you're introducing infrastructure, right, with partnerships with some third-party tools. A lot of happening. So could you just maybe share the most important changes that happened in Woodpecker during this time, and where are you headed?
Sure. So first of all, I think that it's extremely important right now, if you want to basically deliver something that is valuable to your customers, to know what is your core business. And at Woodpecker, I strongly feel that our core business is, first of all, delivering the best deliverability standards that you may have, will sometimes require partnerships. So that's why, for example, it wasn't our first choice to build our own infrastructure. We started partnering with MailDoso. We have other partners to come. So basically growing, integration-wise, the structure that our customers can easily use, that is not just based upon us, but also on like knowing softwares that are best in their class and their standard. So that's one thing. We have introduced a bunch of features, as you mentioned, spin tags. We have added centralized inbox. Now you can also control, this like tiny stuff that matters, like for example, open tracking per email provider. So you have a lot of stuff going on around making it simpler for the user to manage. And if I look at the perspective, like where I want us to be in like next year and next months and, the like short future perspective, I think like cold outreach becomes more and more difficult. And there is a lot of heavy lifting in terms of like tech knowledge, deliverability, setup. It becomes really messy at some point when you need to like learn all of those stuffs and, like step by step start to implement that within your company or your business. So the idea for Woodpecker is to do heavy lifting, like, like a black box solution. So you just take it, you implement it, and that helps you to automate as much as possible, so you don't have to learn the stuff. So you focus on your business, on your total addressable market, on like how you want to reach out to those people, but you don't have to do like the heavy lifting in terms of tech. Yeah, so that's like a big picture perspective.
So it's like a macro picture, I would say. But in terms of some interesting features that you introduce or gonna introduce, something that can be interesting for agencies like me or salespeople that do cold emailing.
Absolutely. So one of the big questions that I still have in my head is what will happen with warm-up process in next months? Because, like if you look, for example, on LinkedIn, there's a lot of discussion like what type of warm-up works? What kind of networks for warm-up are efficient? Or even if warm-up will exist in like 6 months. That sounds kind of bold to say, but on the other hand, like, changes from Google or Microsoft, which are still like major providers, that there's like a lot of movement. So we don't have a proof that warm-up, as we know right now, will operate the same in like 6 months or a year. So we are planning to introduce a system, we internally call it like ramp up, that will help you to start very early in terms of like age of domain and your mailboxes, and ramp up automatically by responding to the signals that you receive from email providers. The very early stage of that implementation is our adaptive sending, but we want to grow this as a feature. So that with Woodpecker, let's say you have like 2 weeks old domain, and like you have just set up mailboxes and you're thinking like what to do to maximize my business effect. Like the goal for us is to let you start sending as soon as possible with like, inclusion of all signals, of your bounce rate, of what you received there and stuff like this. So ultimately with Woodpecker, you can start the soonest that is possible, like from logical perspective, and that over time you can get the best results, the perspective from like what is delivered to the main inbox. Of course, like we can't do everything instead of you, so it matters like how you select your prospects, from where you take them, because like if you don't clean your list or if your sources are so, there are some risks, but we will maximize what we can to get you the best results in terms of inbox placement.
Okay, but are you talking about some visibility, some stats that will help you to identify problems, or are you talking about some
Automation.
automated? Okay, so you're gonna do some practical work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
In order to increase inbox placement, right? That's
Exactly.
the ultimate goal.
Yeah, because showing the stats is one thing, and it's amazing to know, but then you need to be able to operate on the top of that. And you not always get the signals, even from like perspective of your own time, soon enough. Because you're busy with other stuffs, you're managing your clients, or just like, business running takes time. So you have other things
Yeah.
on your plate to manage. So we want to automate as much as possible. And adaptive sending that I mentioned is right now configured to, let's say, protect you from getting quota exceeded error, which means that your email provider got so disappointed, let's say, with your sending that decided to block your sending for like usually 24 hours, but it depends. And now the evolution of that system should go into that we will not let you be even close of that risk, so you can basically proceed with sending. And of course, it will mean that sometimes you will send less, sometimes you will send more. But ultimately, when you look at the time perspective, you will send in a healthier manner. And you don't have to do like inbox placement management in terms of, okay, I look at the data, I figure what's wrong, and then I apply some changes. So we are going into automation of as much as we can in terms of like safety for our users. Of course, I know that it's important for every agency to send as much as possible because that kind of translates to business value. So we are right now analyzing like what is the best approach. We are collecting feedback and stuff like this.
For me, it sounds quite funny, but it reminded me about the movie Terminator, because you have basically machines on one side, which are spam filters, and they are already very advanced. On the other side, you have just an agency owner like me trying to figure out how to deliver, but you're gonna create a new Terminator that will actually fight another one, right? So that's my imagination, the way it works.
It's a great description. I mean, we want to take this fight even for both sides. So I think this is what it
That's
takes.
cool. That's cool. All right, so let's maybe talk about some cold emailing best practices and what you've seen worked in 2024. I think 2025 will be, that's just my opinion, will be pretty similar, meaning difficult. Yes, and definitely new changes all the time. But what works now when it comes to like best practices? Let's say, to give you an example, let's say I'm just a startup that want to start outreach in order to check will my offer work, or just experiment some stuff, and just to begin with outbound. Where should we start? And I know you've spoken about this a lot of times, but I think it's worth mentioning what works right now.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I would say that you always start with tech setup and data, because like that's logically is the beginning. So first thing that you need to like consider or somehow manage is to set up mailboxes, have a backup, because this is something people don't think of. Like, okay, so we'll buy just as many domains and mailboxes as we need, And in case something goes sideways, because when you start, you will make mistakes, that's kind of obvious, you don't have a backup of like additional domains that are pre-warmed up and mailboxes that you can utilize just to switch. So I would say first plan a bit more than you initially think of. And that's like when you have your domains, they're warmed up a bit, so you don't send from something extremely young. You have your mailboxes connected. The next step is to, first of all, think of to whom you want to send and by which tool. And why it matters, because all elements that you have in the process will affect your final result and your deliverability and your inbox placement. And when you think about to whom you send, I also like to think from like very humane perspective, because when you think about like to whom you send, usually you think like your total addressable market, country, like currency that the country has, so in terms of like economics and stuff like this. But it's worth to think like, is your potential prospect using like more of a mobile to read the content that you send, or you are sending to like more of, let's say, classic industries, or the non-IT industries that are, let's say, reading more on a desktop, like computer or stuff. Also, like, is it worth to do some pre-actions, so invest in like LinkedIn activity and branding or whatever is there to make you help to get some recognition? Because like, for example, if someone sends me a cold email and I don't know the person and I don't know the brand, the likelihood that I will reply as a CEO of IT company is super low. But then if you're sending to someone who's not that much into just, all of this LinkedIn craziness and being visible on YouTube and stuff like this, it doesn't matter that much because the person is not in those spheres, in those places. So I do really feel like thinking where your prospects come from, like what is the background and what is their environment, is really important. I still feel, and this is like the tip that Yuri gives a lot, so to read it loud, what do you write? I think it's great, because sometimes when I like read, for example, cold emails that I receive, I feel uncomfortable because that sounds very, machine-based, very like non-human written, very odd. It's not like
Formal,
anything. Yeah, it's either too
vague.
formal or
Yeah.
like sometimes it's passive aggressive, sometimes it's just like there is nothing about you. It's just like a content that is sent to see if like someone will react, but there is no approach to you. So there is no relevancy, no stuff like this. So I think reading it loud is an important point to hold the story. And I would say that ultimately, if you start, the most important is don't give up after first failure. So if you send your first campaign and there is no result, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for your market or your company. You just need to think like what could be done better or more efficient or with different resources, not just, take the very, let's say, early assumption, okay, not for me, because it takes some practice. And like, I remember when we started cold emailing our campaigns like 8 years ago. That's something that I would prefer not to show anyone today. But like, it changes and we get better and better every month and every campaign and every day, actually. So a bit of just, drive to really change stuff and adjust if that's necessary.
Yeah, definitely. So I typically think that one-to-ones is depending on how fast you go, but it's completely enough to figure out if it works for you or not. Because, I mean, for last 2 years, I've been onboarding like many clients, and I can tell that with some type of companies, it was like much easier. With other, it didn't work at all. Because indeed there are very saturated markets, and especially if you use for example Apollo to extract marketing people or salespeople or founders, and just reach out to them with one more piece of software or web development services or software development services again. So it's difficult right now. I've been talking to a lot of founders of this type of companies, and I don't want to, how to say, to disappoint. I think right now it's just much more harder in this specific niches, right? But if you are a more like traditional businesses, and actually I had a huge success with companies that, for example, produce pallets, like it's called
Yeah.
pallet, right? And just sell pallets to logistic companies, and that's all. And when you write a cold email, it's not rocket science. Hi, Jack. We produce and sell pallets. They are certified, sorry. And that's all, you get like 6, 7, 8, 10% response rates. And also I'm observing that local campaigns actually work quite good. For example, if you are on German market and you send in German language, or you are on Polish market, you send in Polish, like naturally conversions responses are much, much better. So if you can adapt even you're a foreign player and you want to work on this market, just, try a different language, or try a language that is native for these people, right? So yeah, I'm just sharing some thoughts on this. Okay, so when it comes to best practices, that's great. One more thing that I would like to ask, some legal aspects, because I know you're an expert in this area as well. So in Europe, we do have GDPR, right? So it's important to follow all the steps. Maybe let's talk about some maybe basics that cold emailers need to follow in order to be compliant in Europe specifically.
Sure, absolutely. So one important thing to know is that GDPR applies to all European countries. It's European law, but particular countries may have their national regulations. So for example,
that's important.
Yeah, because sometimes we assume
sometimes we forget about this.
It's nothing to be too much scared about, but you need to be aware, as your example, you work for a customer from Germany, you need to be aware that, for example, Germany, they have very precise laws in terms of data processing. Or even in Poland now we have new legislation coming in, so there is a variety of additions. But GDPR applies everywhere, and there is nothing to be too much stressed about, it just needs a bit of logical approach. So first of all, GDPR is about data processing. So if you contact prospects, you need to have their data from somewhere, and you need to have legal background to contact them. And you need to have some, let's say, post-processing management that allows you to manage if, for example, someone do not reply to your message, what to do then.
It's very unobvious for a lot of people, actually.
Yeah,
because typically we keep sorry to interrupt, because typically we keep retargeting people as, I remember I was on the conference, and Steli after actually he said this: follow up until you die. But according to GDPR, probably doesn't work, right?
Unfortunately not. So it's it's a risky approach. Let's name it that way.
Okay.
But I would say it's like this. When you take someone's data, usually the safest approach is to rely on sources that are reliable to your market. So usually if you go to prospecting tool, or if you do prospecting yourself, you need to be aware what kind of sources you use. It's a bit different in the States, where you can technically sell some data. It's not like this in Europe. So you need to be aware to check on your sources, if those are GDPR compliant, if they give you any guarantee on type of data or on their accuracy and stuff like this. So when you have someone's data, you most likely rely, and now a bit of legal language, on your justified interest. So that you as an entrepreneur, you are looking for potential customers, and that's kind of your right to have a business and to run it. So that makes sense for you to process those data. But when you rely on it, you need to remember that you start targeting the person, you reach out, you need to give to this person some clear rights. So for example, if someone wishes to withdraw their consent, or someone wishes to resign from being on the list, or just don't want to get any more information from you, there needs to be a clear way. It doesn't have to be unsubscribe link, because people are mixing this up and saying hey, you have to send unsubscribe links, and links are not so good for deliverability. So you can just write, hey, if you don't want to receive further messages, or you want me to delete your data, just reply, because human to human communication. And the same with if someone changes surname or changes their data, they want you to fix it. So for example, if I would change my name to, I don't know, Natalia, and I don't want you to call me by Margaret anymore, I'm just reaching out to you and saying, hey, just please change it. I don't like that you have my old name, whatever is there. So all of those stuffs. And then if someone does not reply to you, the safest way is to have something like a retention period. So period that you internally set up for the company. You say, okay, we will keep those data for 2 months, 3 months, 2 weeks. It depends on the type of your business, because there is not like GDPR guidance that says maximum 90 days. It's up to your business type, so you need to be able to justify it. And after that period, you just remove those data, because, it's like the situation when someone is, for example, on a vacation, the person is not replying to you, not because they are not interested or they don't like your message, they are just not here. So you give yourself a retention period to keep the context, and then if someone is still not responsive, you just remove the data. And a big thing is keeping opt-outs, because that's like a discussion I hear a lot. So let's say you are my prospect and you have opted out from my communication, so I need to remove your data, and I need to somehow remember not to contact you in the future. And that's kind of two opposite things to do, because if I need to remember not to contact you, I need to keep your data somewhere so I can remember that you don't want my emails or anything from me. So the best way is to choose software, like for example, at Woodpecker, we have this feature of GDPR unsubscribe that basically removes personal data and do all of this monitoring on a tech layer. Because then you, as a user of the software, you are not into position that you process those data, and we still like make sure that from your campaign, you will not reach out to the person. So that's a bit difficult to solve any other way, because like ultimately you will have to build the solution like this just to be on the safe side. So yeah, that's like a bit of a simplification, but this is how I would say the process looks like.
Yeah. So that's my favorite part, let's say.
I know.
But yeah, just I think that like the most like let's talk maybe about some practical things. These are very practical, but like let's say, because for the most people, it's important just to avoid spam complaints and to avoid some potential risks people actually sending complaints to some authorities, right?
Yeah.
And that's very important, right? So it's everything depends on how people actually react to your email, and do they have this trigger actually to complain. Yeah. So maybe it all starts just from the way you write and to whom you write. So I think that's where all the problems can start, deliverability problems as well as legal problems. I actually had a conversation with you and about this stuff, and I just came to conclusion that sometimes you need to pitch less and just try to initiate the contact. Because a lot of cold emailers, they are actually try to sell from the first email. Like, hi, we do this and that, and we can like decrease your marketing span 50%, blah, blah, blah. So in some industries, in some cases, it makes sense to do so, right? You need to be very clear why you're reaching out. But if you do not have so clear, justified interest, justified interest, I think it's better strategy would be just initiate like initial contact and just say, introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Vovik. And I know it's like not trendy, but just wanted to introduce, by the way, I do this and that. Just wondering if we can like connect, blah, 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 something like that. So that's just my opinion. What do you think about it? Not to sell.
I think like not to sell is a good practice, and also when you think about it, you are reaching out to like human beings, you're not reaching out to machines. So well, if someone is nice to you and is very open and offers something that makes sense to you, like usually you are not getting triggered. Of course, there will be always a risk that someone is just irritated by the fact that they received an email. But I would say law and deliverability are very similar here. So let's say if someone would write to you or to me like, hey, I think that I may see the reason to help you with something, and this something is really relevant to me. So like, let's say something that matters from my perspective. Maybe you want to grab a coffee. Maybe you want to just talk. So just, it's not like, hey, do you want to buy my product? Hey, do you want to buy my service? It's more like human to human. Because look, how the prospect may feel if you start an email with legal like sentences like, hey, I'm reaching out, this is my legal basis, and I'm reaching out in line with this law and with this law, and I really see these emails. Like, is it the way that you talk with your like a friend or a colleague from work? No, it's not, because it sounds very uncomfortable and weird, and it's not natural. So I would say if you don't want to get like, if you don't want to trigger your prospects to react to your messages in a negative way, you need to try to write it in a way that is very like personal to them, so it doesn't feel like you're pushing, you want to sell. Because when people get triggers and say like, hey, from where you have my data and like why you're reaching out, when they feel pushed, that you want just a benefit out of like their existence, let's say, and their business and whatever is there. If you don't do it, my experience is that you usually don't get like formal complaints, you don't get reported as a spam. You really can avoid a lot of problems if you just like focus on being a decent human being to another human being. And that sounds really cheap, but I feel that's true.
Yeah, it's true. And also, I think making sure that you can't contacting the right people, because I think that data is completely a separate topic, and where you take it from, right? Again, most of people just use Apollo, and it's just like so overused. So yeah, as a reminder, guys, we are launching Research AI soon, and yeah, using real-time data. Yeah.
This what you said is actually really important, because today I've got a cold email saying like, hey, we are company this and this, and we have helped a lot of fintech companies just like Woodpecker. And I was like, this is the moment when I'm really like, negative emotions start to kick in, because like, why didn't you do your
Yeah.
research? We're not even close to fintech. Like, come on.
Yeah, probably ChatGPT just qualified your company as fintech. I think next version will be better.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think people just we need to learn better prompts to ChatGPT probably.
But also, I think we need better data classification, because otherwise that
Yeah.
gets hectic.
Look, I think that now we have like much better like tools options. Now we have Clay, or even if you put effort in Apollo, let's say, and just exclude all the titles that you are not interested in, just put effort, then just use Clay to segment, to classify everything, to qualify. You have all the tools to have good databases. So that's definitely very important. Okay, I have a last question. We're about to finish this very interesting conversation indeed. What are your thoughts when it comes to AI just taking over sales, outreach, and everything? So there are a lot of tools. Actually, I was checking out one tool yesterday, and this tool was like automating like multi-channel outreach, liking, posting, commenting, everything like. So, and I was a little bit, upset because, for me, sales was always about human connection and just talking to people, delivering value, and that's where I also felt, how to say, dissatisfaction, But there's, AI SDR right now taking over, right? So AI SDR is sending outreach messages, soliciting everything. And I just don't feel comfortable about that. And where's basically this, where should be this human part, let's say, and where we can use AI in order to keep it natural and not to lose the.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I know that there are people supporting both sides, let's say. I think like right now AI is doing a lot of great job in automating processes that are very repetitive and not very appealing to work at. There's like a lot of work that can be taken over and actually, delivered on a better standard than like we could, because like we have our own capacities and stuff like this. But to be very honest, like talking about IT industry, if I feel or I fear that the message that I have received is automated or is a bot or is AI written, I would not reply. And actually not in cold emailing, but on LinkedIn, when I reach out to someone and I write all my messages and comments manually, I don't use ChatGPT because I don't know, I just care enough for like people I talk with to just write to them personally. And I've got a question from like one of our customers say, just one quick thing, I need to ask you, are you a bot or a person? Because if you're a bot, I don't want to talk with you anymore. So I think that this shows like where is the benchmark. People want to interact with human beings. They don't mind having automations and help and support from AI or from other technology. But if you, like, for example, from my perspective, if you want to do a business with me, I want to at least be able to reach a state when I talk with someone who is like person who may understand and like, you know, feel some empathy towards whatever we are doing here and how we are doing business. And probably that would be like, you know, as you said, for some industries, like the traditional ones, even simple automation brings you amazing results. I don't think that applies to like IT industry because it's more advanced. I would say the same would apply to AI. So AI SDRs, if you target like someone who is very aware of how IT industry works, I don't think it will bring you result at the stage that I see right now. Maybe that will change in the future. But we kind of all crave for like human to human interaction. I don't feel like, you know, it will go that way that you can just say, okay, so now only AI sells, no need for salespeople. Yeah.
As the CEO of tech company, would you agree with that? Because I think from the technology perspective, automating like messages, emails is much easier than, for example, building AI systems for sales intelligence. So it's
Absolutely.
just more, I think, yeah, I see you agree. I think it's just more complicated. And what we really need is more of sales intelligence than stuff that help us soliciting people automatically on autopilot, you know?
Yeah, I would say whatever helps salespeople and SDRs and people who are working on customer relation to scale up is absolutely amazing because you give them like an armor to become more resilient and more resistant and grow. But I don't think we are in a place where just, you know, making the whole automation instead of any human touch would make sense because then the market will figure and you will not be talking to me. You will be talking to my AI assistant. That will be just another system. So if that goes that way, it will not work anyways.
All right. It was very insightful and interesting conversation. And so we all just keep fingers crossed that the future will be brighter. There are a lot of exciting things happening right now in technology, absolutely. But there are a lot of questions when it comes to sales and how it will look like, how will we actually sell. So let's see. So thank you so much, Margaret, for this conversation. And yeah, thank you guys for watching this.
Thank you, my pleasure.